Before I start, I would like to use this opportunity to thank Beit Avi for hosting this event. I feel very privileged, and especially to you, Tamar and Buya, the technical help. A funny thing, this morning I was thinking about the Zoom meeting, and I realized that for me, as the person who is giving the talk, it's very much like believing in God. You know He's there, but you can't see Him. So without further ado, I would like to start the talk. Okay, I would like to introduce myself. This is me. I was born in Haifa on 1961, and this explains my accent, my English accent. This is a very important picture in my heritage. This is my mother, me, my grandmother, and my great-grandmother. For people my age, to have a grandmother and even a great-grandmother is a big thing. I studied here in Haifa in the Hadassah of Canada College of Design and Visual Art, and I was also teaching there. I studied in the graphic design, and I specialized in illustration. An illustrator's job is to read the text, any text. It can be an article in the newspaper or the Haggadah or the Bible. You have to understand quickly the essence of the text and to try to pass the main idea to the reader in the best visual way. It can be ugly or beautiful, but it must be eye-catching and interesting. So when I finished and when I graduated the college, working in one of the biggest newspapers in Israel, in Maariv, and I will show you some of my works there. This illustration is an article about a 5 years old who is already guilty. People who abuse children. This is about a flat in Gordon Street. This is about chicken soup. An American soldier in bed. After 5 years in Maariv, I moved to another big newspaper. Don't forget that at the time, these were really big and important newspapers, Yediot Acharonot. And some of the illustrations I made there. This is the financial section, and the article was about the people who are living the provident funds. This is about the furniture industry. Wow, this was published on the Erev Yom Kippur. It's about the kaparot and where to invest the money. Traveling during the holidays. In this particular case, it's on Passover. So I was working in Tel Aviv for 12 years. During these years, I was living in Haifa. I got married and I had 3 beautiful children, but they became very wild. And when my husband also found a work in Tel Aviv, we decided that I will stop working in the newspaper and dedicate myself to the children until I find some new idea in what to do and what to illustrate. So it was very hard living the newspaper because the life in newspaper is very hectic. You're in the middle of whatever is happening. You know everything before everybody. And I was thinking for a long time what to do. Finally, I decided to illustrate the Passover Haggadah because Haggadah is being, and the Leil Seder is being practiced everywhere. Everybody is doing something and reading a portion of the Haggadah. And it was important and interesting for me to deal with a whole different text that I used to do before then. So I illustrated the Haggadah, and on the cover of the Haggadah, I added a verse out of the Song of Songs called Dodi, the voice of my beloved. And when my cousins in Jerusalem received this copy of the Haggadah, they said, "Oh, it's a wonderful illustration. We think it would be wonderful if you could illustrate the whole Song of Songs, and better still, why won't you do a set of the 5 scrolls?" And this is how this project began. I'm showing you now the end of the project. The box of the 5 Megillot contains each Megillah separated from the cover from the front and from the back. As I had already one illustration from the Song of Songs, this was the first book I started illustrating. Now, the Song of Songs it was written by King Solomon, and the traditional commentary sees the text as a parable for God's love for the Jewish people. Others treat it literally as a love between a man and a woman. And I was very impressed with the connection to the land of Israel, the description of the panoramas, the natural resources, the seasons, and the typical fauna and flora found in the land of Israel. And now I will show you a few illustrations I drew in this book. Look not upon me because I am black. This is not unpolitically correct. The woman is tanned because she is working in the fields, but she is beautiful and the nature is beautiful. I am the rose of Sharon and the lily of the valleys. The background depicts the typical flora of the Sharon plains, and both the nature, flowers, trees, and the young women are at the peak of their bloom. Look from the top of Amana, the top of Snir and Hermon, from the lion's dens, from the mountains of the leopards. As King Solomon wrote this book, and he was the wisest man in the world, he knew how to talk to the animals, and the animals were not afraid of him, and he was not afraid of them. So while visiting the northern border of the country, the Golan Heights, he sits with them close to him. And we can see Snil and Hermon, the rivers, in the picture. Okay. I charge you, O daughters of Jerusalem, if you find my beloved. The girls are discussing this important issue, but on the back of the picture, you can see the mountains of Jerusalem and the old city in the middle of the picture. And on both sides of the picture, you can see the lions, which are the symbols of the city. Many waters cannot quench love, neither can the floods drown it. Here in our area, in the area of the Middle East, in Israel, water and love are similar in their importance. They are as precious and important as love. And I have here three forms of water. You can see the clouds in the sky. You can see the waterfalls on the two sides of the with fish, which are fertile signs in it. After illustrating the book of the Song of Songs, I moved on to the book of Esther. Before illustrating the book as a book, I already illustrated the book of Esther on a kosher parchment. And the advantage of a parchment is that you can open the Megillah and you can see the entire story at once, spread out in front of you. And given this structure, I decided not to illustrate specific verses, but the whole story divided into sections. And again, 5 samples of this Megillah. In this picture, you can see King Ahasuerus's feast. He invited his ministers to the feast. Haman was a power freak, I would say. He wanted everybody to be obedient to him and everybody should bow before him. But Mordechai, the Jew, didn't bow. He was Esther's uncle. After fasting for 3 days, Esther went to the king's garden uninvited, but luckily she finds favor in his eyes, and she invites him and Haman in her house. Haman honors Mordechai as he suggested the king to honor a person that the king favors. He didn't know that the man to be honored would be Mordechai. He thought about himself. This is the feast Queen Esther made to Ahasuerus and Haman, where she reveals to the king that Haman planned to kill all the Jews. So of course, everybody knows the end of this Megillah, so we can leave it. And next, I did the Book of Ruth. Now, the Book of Ruth is a special book. It's all about generosity and sacrifice and kindness, which are rewarded. In the point of view of the colors in this Megillah, in this scroll, I went before doing the scroll around Bethlehem during the harvest time, and I was looking on the pictures, on the colors on the fields. Or to leave the earthly tones, the green and the yellows, and of course blue, like the first illustration. This is the family tree. In the picture, we can see Naomi and Elimelech, their 2 sons, Machlon and Kilion, and the 2 daughters-in-law, Orpah and Ruth. Then the man died, and the story began. I will read the verse because it's so beautiful. And Ruth said, "For whether thou goest, I will go. Thy people shall be my people, and thy God, my God." I think it's the most beautiful verse in the whole Bible. Naomi suggests to Ruth to leave her because she had no future, she had no more sons to marry Ruth to, and she wanted her to make a new life in Moab. While Orpah stayed there, Ruth wouldn't leave Naomi. When they came to Bethlehem, they were very poor. They had no income, and Ruth, Naomi was kind of older, so she stayed at home while Ruth went to glean the grains. Uh, the biblical rule says that anyone who has a field should leave a corner of the field for the poor to glean the grains. But Boaz looks at Ruth and he offers her to come again and again to his field, and even if the poor section will be empty and she will have to move to a different field, she should still come to his own field and to eat with his maidens. She goes home and tells her mother-in-law whatever happened, and Naomi advises her to go to the barn. And so she went down to the threshing floor and did all her mother-in-law had told her. And when Boaz ate and drank, and his heart was merry, at the end of the heap of grain, and uncovered his feet and laid herself down. So your internet. So many people wanted me to show exactly what happened there, but my policy is that it's none of my business. Anyway, I wanted to emphasize the man's health, the wealthy. He was a very rich man. You can see the structure of the barn. It's the beautiful arches. He's covered with the golden embroidered blanket, and you can see the piles of grain around him. And now we reach the climax of the scroll. And Ofed fathered Ishai, and Ishai fathered David. Not only that Ruth marries well, and she gives birth to a son, and Naomi's status was restored to her, but also we can see the authors wants us to know that King David is one of the descendants of Ruth, and this is how she was rewarded for her kindness and good heart. At this point, I had in my hand 2 hot boiling potatoes. I could choose to illustrate the Ecclesiastes or to illustrate Lamentations, and both are not easy to deal with. Still, I prefer to start with the Ecclesiastes. I found this book to contain thoughts and concepts dealing with life, what is good in it, and if life is indeed good in life is indeed exists. So I really wanted to illustrate only the positive verses, but it wasn't always, I didn't always success. This book also was written by King Solomon, but it's a whole different King Solomon. This King Solomon doesn't receive the roses and butterflies coming down from the sky, but he almost in every idea or thought, he shows the positive and immediately the opposite idea. And so I will show you 5 illustrations as an example for what I did in this book. For in much wisdom there is much grief, and he that increases knowledge increases sorrow. Enola Gay is the name of the airplane that dropped the atomic bomb. For me, the best example of a great mind and cleverness that brought a terrible, terrible disaster is the atomic bomb. And this is what I did in this verse. This is whimsical. Better is a poor and wise child than an old and foolish king who no longer knows how to take care of himself. When I read this verse, immediately I thought of Hans Christian Andersen and the Emperor's New Clothes. רגע. Better is the sight of the eyes than the wandering of the desire. At first I drew this man sitting there at this table, but on the table were many, many dishes, fish and meat and all kinds of delicacies, but he desired to have something that wasn't on the table but behind him. But on the second reading of this verse, I realized that what King Solomon is telling us is, look what you have, enjoy what you have, be happy with what you have, look on the on the half full glass. And I changed the illustration accordingly. Wisdom strengthens the wise more than 10 rulers who are in the city. When I read this verse, I immediately thought of the Trojan War and how stupid were the people in the city who let the free gift into the city. I think maybe King Solomon heard about this event as well. I have seen servants upon horses and princes walking as servants upon the earth. At first, it was shocking to me to think of servants on the horses and the princes walking upon the earth. But then, on the other hand, this is democracy, equal opportunities. Everybody has a chance to advance itself, and leaders. And you know what? More important, if a leader sins, he should be punished. At this point, I couldn't avoid referring to the Book of Lamentations. And when I went with my books to shows and to sales and to assemblies in the United States, whenever I came, they said, but what will you do when you reach Lamentations? And I didn't know. I had no idea. What to do with this harsh text. I decided to read it again and again, and finally I found a verse where I understood the whole Megillah, and I would like to read this verse to you. He has built against me and surrounded me with bitterness and hardship. He has set me in dark places, as those who are long ago dead. In Hebrew, you say, ke metei olam, as those who are long ago dead. And I realized at once that this is talking about the death camps, the concentration camps for the people from the outside. The people in the camps were as if they were dead. They couldn't care less about about them. They didn't even bomb the railway that is driving to the camps in order to stop the killing, although they knew about it. And the people inside the concentration camps were, of course, almost dead. And then I read the next two verses, and I will read them to you. Held me around so that I cannot get out. He has made my chain heavy. Also, when I cry and shout, he shuts out my prayer. This convinced me about this verse. And it was so strong that suddenly all the other verses popped out from the Megillah, from the scroll, and I understood what they said to me. Of course, I couldn't illustrate this scroll in my typical earlier work in a colorful and easy going, and I had to think of a different method. And so this is the first project I did with linoleum cut, which is basically you take out a portion of the linoleum in order to leave what you want to be printed. So then the whole Megillah is black and white. And then I also attribute it to the German expressionism that was practiced in Germany between the two world wars and was criticized by the Nazis. And now I will start the whole Megillah, and I will show you my thoughts and my illustration to the Megillah. How lonely sits the city that was full of people. She has become like a widow. She that was great among the nations. Again, we can see the like a, ke almana, like a widow. And we know that almana, a widow, is a terrible situation to be. It's a sad one, and you miss your spouse, and it's not a happy thing that can happen to a person. But to be like a widow, for instance, if you think of Tami Arad, the wife of the missing Israel Air Force navigator Ron Arad, it's a much worse situation. You can do nothing. You can go neither here or there. For these things I weep. My eye runs down with water, because the Comforter that should relieve my soul is far from me. My children are desolate, for the enemy has prevailed. Enemy in Hebrew is oyev. So I use the swastika to show a bet, which is the end of the word oyev, and I was left also with an oy, which is very, very Jewish. My priest and my elders perished in the city while they sought food to revive their souls. A frightening verse describing what went on in the ghettos. He has given, no, I will read the whole verse. The Lord has cast off his altar. He has lost his sanctuary. He has given to the hand of the enemy the walls of her palaces. They have made a noise in the house of the Lord as in the day of an appointed feast. On Kristall night, many synagogues throughout Germany were destroyed. They say to their mothers, "Where is grain and wine?" You know, when a person is in need of comfort, in a trouble, he always call Ima, mommy, mother. He refers to his mother. And the mothers look at the children and they cannot help them. My virgins and my young men are falling by the sword. You have slain them in the day of your anger. You have slaughtered without mercy. This image of the little boy from the Warsaw Ghetto symbolizes the rebel of the Jewish Warsaw Ghetto in the Germans. At that time, there were still a few or some or still were older people in the ghetto, but the young men and women, they were falling in the sword. They were slaughtered. And this verse symbolizes for me the Warsaw Ghetto. You have made us offscoring and refused in the midst of the nations. Well, I don't think we have to explain that. Render to them recompense, O Lord, according to the work of their hands. While I don't think they got their recompense, I refer to I show the work of their hands, and I will read to you a verse my father really liked to say when we thought about the Shoah. He said, "Fill their faces with shame, let them be confounded and frightened forever." Amen. Those who were slain with the sword are better than those who are slain with hunger. And I refer to the rebels in the death camps, the Sonderkommando rebel, for instance, and of course the partisans in the forests of Europe. The end of the Megillah, the scroll, even more convincing for me that I am right with my interpretation. The punishment of your iniquity is accomplished, O daughter of Zion. He will no longer carry you away into exile. At the end of World War II, the survivors tried to reach the land of Israel, legal and unlegal, in any way they could. And at the end of this scroll, turn us to you, O Lord, and we shall return. Renew our days as of old. This verse describes the revival, this and that's why I have a little beam, a little light, and a little color in this picture. I want to show you that after I did the printed set, I also did a limited edition Book of Lamentations. And as you see on the cover of the book, I have a cover made out of cloth that hints towards the striped pajamas of the concentration camps prisoners. And I can tell you it took me a long time to find the shabby chic right cloth. I also emphasize the word Eicha with a little yellow embroidery. The front cover of the Book of Eicha hints to a grave stone for all these people who died. And I want to show you also two double spreads of the limited edition book. The text appears white on black and the illustration black on white. And when you open the book, you can see the pages black, white on the side, and it hints towards a talit, which is black and white. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Tamar. I think these are texts that most people see as text and words, and you managed to bring them to life in art, giving it a lot more meaning than it had just as words. If anyone has a question regarding Tamar's artistic work, and this, you can use a chat. I see we have thank you from Boston, so we have people joining us from all over the world. Any questions, use your chat, and if not, we've been posting links to our future events coming up. We have a new series with Dr. Asad Eberman about poetry and Zionism. That's going to begin in the beginning of January, and we'll have another meeting of authors with Balint and about his Balint's book Kafka. We'll be speaking to Matthew Friedman. So please follow our updates. And we have a few questions here, Tamar. So Jeremy wants to know if you plan to do any other biblical texts.
Of course, I'm working now on the Book of Jonah, and this is my next, I think this is my next project.
Okay. Rosalind wants to know if your set of Megillot is available in England. I think you have a website where people can see where they can purchase your Megillot and other artistic works. Okay, so I think questions regarding buying the Megillot, you can contact Tamar Messer directly. Could you want to tell us your website? People are asking about your website. So I think if you Google Tamar Messer, they can reach your website.
It's tamarmesser.com.
Okay, tamarmesser.com. Okay, so thank you very much, Tamar. And everybody, we hope to see you in the future events, and good evening.
Good evening. Thank you.